You know, there are some names in history that are so tied to evil, they become a kind of shorthand for cruelty itself. And today, we're going to take a hard look at one of those names, Josef Mengele. We're going to trace the path of a man who twisted the oath to heal into a license for unimaginable horror, from a promising medical student to one of the most infamous war criminals of the 20th century.
So who was this man they called the Angel of Death? It's a name he earned through acts that are frankly hard to even comprehend. But here's the thing. To really get a handle on the monster, you have to first try and understand the man.
And the story really reaches its horrifying peak right here. Auschwitz, 1943. This is the place where a doctor's duty to preserve life got twisted into a license to kill, to experiment, and to terrorize. His presence on the selection platform, deciding fates with just a gesture, became a symbol of the camp's industrial-scale murder.
All right, so to really unpack this, here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with the infamous reputation he built, then we'll rewind to his surprisingly ambitious beginnings. We'll look at how ideology corrupted him, detail his unspeakable crimes at Auschwitz, track his decades-long escape from justice, and finally, confront his absolutely unrepentant legacy. So, let's talk about that nickname, Angel of Death. He earned it for this chillingly calm, almost serene demeanor he had while presiding over the selection. That's the process of deciding who was sent straight to the gas chambers. His name became a whisper of pure terror in the camp, synonymous with sadistic medical experiments that treated human beings as little more than lab rats.
But here's what's so unsettling. The monster of Auschwitz wasn't born in the camp. To really understand this story, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, to a life that showed really no signs of the horrors that were to come. And that contrast is absolutely key here.
So, Mengele was born into a wealthy, pretty respected family. He was a good student, he was cultured, into art and music, and athletic. And his big ambition? He wanted to make his family proud by becoming their very first medical scientist. On the surface, that sounds perfectly normal, right? Maybe even admirable.
And he was definitely on a clear path to success. I mean, he studied both medicine and philosophy, got his PhD with a thesis on racial morphology, and landed a prestigious research position, all before he even turned 27. He was building a very respectable career.
So where did it all go so horribly wrong? This section right here. This is the turning point. This is where Mengele's personal ambition starts to fuse with the toxic, deadly ideology of the Nazi Party. You know, his radicalization wasn't an overnight thing. It was a series of deliberate steps. He started with a nationalist group, then he fell under the influence of a mentor who was pushing this dangerous pseudoscience called race hygiene. And from there, it was a pretty short leap to joining the Nazi Party, and then its most fanatical wing, the SS.
And we actually have it in his own words. Years later, he wrote that fighting what he called the Marxist Bolshevik attack was the decisive factor in his life. So in his mind, he wasn't joining an evil cause. He believed he was defending his country.
And you can see this corruption so clearly in his science. Before 1937, his research, while based on some pretty flawed ideas, at least used accepted scientific methods. But after he joins this intellectual circle in Frankfurt, his work completely devolves. It becomes Nazi-fueled pseudoscience, where he's just twisting science to fit his ideology.
And all of this corrupted ambition, his medical training, his Nazi fanaticism, it all comes together and finds its ultimate horrific expression at Auschwitz. This is where the ambitious doctor becomes the Angel of Death.
He arrived in May of '43 and, well, he wasted no time making a name for himself. He didn't just perform his duties, he embraced them with this chilling enthusiasm. Get this, he was known to volunteer for selection duty on his days off. He was even awarded a medal for his so-called disease control methods, which were in reality just acts of mass murder. So you see this number, 600. What does that even mean? Well, let me tell you. To stop a single typhus outbreak in one of the women's barracks, Mengele's solution was to send all 600 Jewish women who lived there directly to the gas chamber. He didn't see patients to be treated, he saw a problem to be eliminated.
And you have to remember the sheer scale of all this. His actions took place in a camp where over 1 million people, the vast majority of them Jewish, were systematically murdered. Auschwitz was a factory of death, and Mengele was one of its most industrious managers.
And then there was his so-called research, which was, honestly, the stuff of nightmares. He was obsessed with twins and genetic anomalies. He performed these agonizing experiments,
injecting chemicals into children's eyes, removing organs without anesthesia, and routinely murdering his subjects with chloroform just so he could dissect their bodies. People were nothing more than disposable research material to him. As the war finally ended and the Third Reich collapsed, a whole new chapter for Mengele began, a 34-year flight from justice. The man who held the power of life and death over so many would now spend the rest of his own life in hiding.
Just look at this timeline of his decades on the run. He flees Auschwitz just before the Soviets arrive, gets captured by the Americans, and then, unbelievably, is released. He uses that infamous rat line network to escape to South America. He lived there for years and even narrowly escaped being captured by Mossad agents, who nabbed Adolf Eichmann instead. In the end, he died a free man in 1979.
And this is the question that has haunted Nazi hunters and historians for decades. How? I mean, how on earth does one of the world's most wanted men simply vanish and live out the rest of his days?
Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was this crazy combination of foresight, a network of sympathizers, a rotating cast of aliases, and frankly, a whole lot of luck. He had the foresight to refuse the standard SS blood type tattoo, which helped him slip through those initial Allied screenings. And for a long time, investigators just lost the trail and assumed he was probably dead.
So, in the end, Mengele was never brought to trial. He got to live into old age. And you have to wonder, right? In his final years, did he feel any remorse for what he'd done? The answer is a definitive and deeply chilling no.
And this quote is maybe the most damning evidence of all, because it comes from his own son, Rolf. After visiting his father in hiding in 1977, Rolf came to the conclusion that his father was an unrepentant Nazi who showed zero remorse, justifying everything he did at Auschwitz as simply doing his duty. And the story ends with this final bizarre twist of fate. Mengele, the man obsessed with measuring skulls and cataloging human bodies based on his perverse racial theories, well, his own skeleton was eventually exhumed, and today it's used as a teaching tool for medical students in Brazil. Just a strange postscript to a life of horror.
And that leaves us with this final, really unsettling question. Because the story of Josef Mengele isn't just about one monstrous man. It forces us to ask, how can any person, someone with education, with privilege, with ambition, become so utterly corrupted by an ideology that they completely abandon their own humanity? And that's a question that remains as relevant today as it was in the ashes of Auschwitz.